Welcome to Daily Dose Radio, a 5-minute devotional podcast studying the Psalms verse by verse. Broadcast from the ever-beautiful Sharonville, Ohio, on the sunny side of Cincinnati. Hey there, friends. Welcome back to Daily Dose Radio. I always like to think of Daily Dose Radio like a grand hallway. It's a huge warehouse with rooms off to the side of a grand hallway that just traverses the entire warehouse. And we're on our little segways. So, get your helmet on and tighten up them chin straps. Hop on your Segway. We're going to scooter on down through this a little bit at a time and investigate each room in this little warehouse of ours. That's Daily Dose Radio. That's what we do. The Salter Segway. Dr. McGee had his Bible bus. We're just going to call this the Salter Segway. So we're going to scooter on down here and check out the room that's entitled Psalm 44. And we've been looking at that all week this week. We've seen this beautiful confession that we had there in verse 4. Thou art my king, O God. Command deliverances for Jacob. Also the great confession of faith that, it's not by our sword or by the strength of our arm or by my bow, he says there, but it's you that save. You're the one who delivers. But then we find out that God cast them off, that he made them to turn back and gave them up like sheep. And we saw the whole nature of that turning from his people. And then yesterday we discovered why. Why did God turn from his people? Well, it wasn't because of sin. What's the other reason that God would turn from his people? It's because of righteousness. So he allows persecution to come so that we can be even deeper in our holiness and walking in righteousness. That's the way it happens. He refines our silver, as it were, in a furnace, stoked 7 times. And so here we are today. We come to the end, and we find ourselves now looking forward to the New Testament. Let me read for you today, beginning here in Romans. We'll go to Romans here in just a minute. In Psalm 44, verse 22. Yea, for thy sake are we killed all the day long. We are counted as sheep for the slaughter. Awake, why sleepest thou, O Lord? Arise, cast us not off forever. Wherefore hidest thou thy face, and forgettest our affliction and our oppression? For our soul is bowed down to the dust, and our belly cleaveth unto the earth. Arise for our help, and redeem us for thy mercy's sake. And that is why God does redeem us. He does it for the sake of his mercy. And Paul, writing in the book of Romans, begins in verse 18 to talk about the persecution and the trouble which the believer will face in this life. And he comes down to verse 35 in that 8th chapter of Romans, and he says this, verse 35, Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation, or distress, or persecution, or famine, or nakedness, or peril, or sword? As it is written, For thy sake we are killed all the day long. We are accounted as sheep for the slaughter. Nay, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him that loved us. When the apostle calls on the believers here to say this is we are more than conquerors. This is our confession. He's encouraging that. He looks back here to this psalm and says, this is what the Bible has to say about those who live righteously. We find ourselves in this condition because there is such a conflict between the world and between faith that those who walk according to the way of the world and those who walk according to the way of the Lord are going to find themselves in conflict. And so the believer will suffer because of that. Not to be despairing over that, he looks, I think, to the end of this psalm where it says, Arise for our help, and redeem us for thy mercy's sake. It is because of the mercy of God that we are redeemed from our troubles. Notice that also we have the word awake there in verse 23. It's interesting the way this request comes to a close. He begins with awake. Of course, the Lord's not asleep. Awake, O Lord. And he ends with arise for our help. I hope you'll join me again next time as we look at Psalm 45 on Daily Dose Radio. Thanks for listening to Daily Dose Radio. I'm David Smith. The music today has been performed by the Bluegrass Experiment. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time on Daily Dose Radio.